Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a truly fascinating piece of research from the Journal of Leadership and Organizational Studies. It's titled, Does Leader Humor Influence Employee Voice? We're going to figure out if a boss's sense of humor is just, a quirky personality trait, or if it's actually a vital, highly measurable management tool. Okay, let's dive into this. So, you know the stereotype, right? We've all seen the boss who constantly cracks jokes, maybe trying just a little too hard to be the cool, fun manager. But here's the real question. Does a joking boss actually make for a better team? For the longest time, a lot of us might have just dismissed leader humor as goofing off, a total distraction from the real work. But as we're going to see in the study today, it is far from a distraction. When it's used correctly, it's actually a highly effective tool that drives real, tangible results. Now, to really grasp why a boss's humor matters so much, we kind of have to look at the dark side first, the catastrophic dangers of an environment that entirely lacks it. The researchers zero in on a terrifying workplace reality, employee silence. They point straight to the infamous Theranos scandal as a textbook example. In a highly toxic, totally rigid work environment created from the top down, employees were kept completely silent about some incredibly serious organizational wrongdoings. Because think about it. When people are literally too afraid to speak up, companies fail. Fast. In academia, this concept of speaking up is known as employee voice, and it basically comes in two distinct flavors. First, there's promotive voice. That's when you suggest a fresh, innovative idea to make things run better. It's proactive, it's positive, people love it. But then we have prohibitive voice. This is when an employee raises their hand to prevent a massive failure, point out a critical flaw, or basically say, hey, this is a bad practice. Prohibitive voice is absolutely crucial for catching fatal errors before they explode. But it is immensely riskier for the employee on a personal level. I mean, nobody wants to be the messenger who gets shot, right? So how do we fix this? How do you actually build an environment where people feel safe taking that personal risk? That brings us to Section 1, the humor catalyst, dismantling that wall of silence. Before we go any further, we really need to define what these researchers mean by leader humor. We are absolutely not talking about an aggressive, sarcastic stand-up routine or making jokes at someone else's expense. According to the data, effective leader humor is specifically the use of positive, amusing communication designed to relieve tension, diffuse conflicts, and, importantly, reduce social distance. Think of it as an interpersonal resource. It's literally the social lubricant that helps the gears of a team turn without grinding. Ultimately, humor bridges that very real, formidable gap between boss and employee. Because let's be honest, formal status differences in a workplace can be super intimidating. But when a leader injects a little levity into the room or uses some self-deprecating humor to poke fun at their own mistakes, it instantly melts away those formal barriers. It signals to the team, hey, we're on the same level, which makes them infinitely more approachable. But the thing is, being approachable is really just the surface level. What's happening underneath is way more profound. Which leads right into Section 2, this safety net effect. Let's look at the actual psychological mechanism here. The core argument of this study is that a leader's humor directly builds something called psychological safety. You've probably heard the term. It's that deeply held belief that you're not going to be judged, humiliated, or punished for taking an interpersonal risk, like throwing out a half-baked idea or respectfully pointing out a manager's mistake. And just to prove how huge this is, the researchers cite a massive 4-year study done at Google. Google found that psychological safety, more than any other factor, was the absolute critical differentiator between their successful and unsuccessful teams. Let's move to and see how this builds step by step in the real world. Step 1, the leader uses positive humor. Step 2, this actively builds up an environment of psychological safety. Step 3, because that environment now feels safe, employees freely use their voice to speak up. This whole chain is grounded in what's called social information processing theory. The basic idea is that we are all constantly scanning our environment for social cues to figure out how we should behave. A leader cracking a warm joke, that is a massive, flashing neon sign that says, hey, it is safe here, you can be yourself. And honestly, this perfectly illustrates why the mechanism works so well. Humor sends those safe social cues. It totally lowers the interpersonal risk. Your team members start to realize they're going to get the benefit of the doubt, even if they bring up an unpopular opinion. Plus, it lightens heavy, stressful atmospheres. The study points out that engaging in prohibitive voice, being the one to point out a major flaw, is psychologically depleting. It takes a real emotional toll on you. Humor provides this vital, refreshing emotional buffer that replenishes the team's energy. But just when you think we've got this whole dynamic figured out, the researchers drop a really fascinating variable into the mix.
So, Section 3, the team humor twist. This is a crucial variable. To really get this twist, we have to look at a concept called the substitutes for leadership theory. This theory proposes a kind of radical idea. Leaders might not always be needed. I know, right? It suggests that certain contextual factors, like incredibly strong team dynamics, can actually neutralize or completely lessen the need for specific leadership behaviors. Basically, if a team is already super cohesive and highly self-managing, they're already fulfilling the leadership functions themselves.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it maps out the moderating effect of the team's own humor. You've got these two very different trends. On one hand, you have teams that already possess a high level of team humor, and you'll notice how flat that impact trend is. The leaders' jokes don't really change the outcome much. But then, look at the trend for teams with low team humor. There is an incredibly steep upward slope, which shows exactly where a boss's humor matters the absolute most. So let's break that down simply. If you're dealing with high team humor, leader humor is actually largely redundant. If your team is already laughing together in meetings, sending memes, and has built up a great foundation of trust and psychological safety on their own, the boss cracking a joke doesn't actually add a whole lot to the group's overall safety. The team is essentially acting as a substitute for the leader. But here is the major scientific plot twist. Low team humor means leader humor is absolutely crucial. If you have a team that is naturally serious, highly tense, or where peer-to-peer jokes just kind of fall flat, the boss's jokes are desperately needed. In those low-humor, stiff environments, the leader's levity is literally the primary icebreaker. It becomes the sole source of psychological safety. Okay, so we've covered a ton of fascinating academic theory here, but what does this actually look like in the real world?
Section 4, the bottom line. Let's get into the practical takeaways.
Let's bring it all together for managers, leaders, and HR folks. So the crucial point is basically captured right here in this matrix. Consider this your go-to playbook. If you're managing a low team humor environment, one that's super serious and high tension, your positive humor is a critical, non-negotiable requirement for building safety and getting people to actually speak up. Conversely, if you're overseeing a high team humor environment that's already cohesive and relaxed, you can totally afford to step back. Your humor is redundant because your team is already doing the heavy lifting of managing their own psychological safety. Straight from the discussion section of the study, we get some highly practical, real-world advice. First, treat humor as a strategic tool. It's not just a cute personality quirk, it's a lever you can pull. Second, always assess your team's existing vibe and humor level first, so you know if your intervention is even needed. Third, and this is big, deploy humor actively during high-stress, rapidly unfolding crises. The researchers actually highlight periods like the COVID-19 pandemic as times when teams really struggle to find levity on their own and desperately need their leaders to provide it. And lastly, if you want a naturally self-managing, psychologically safe team, actively try to hire individuals who just naturally possess a good, positive sense of humor. So the next time you step into a conference room or log onto a virtual call, take just a second to read the room. Based on everything we've looked at today regarding the science of workplace humor, ask yourself, is your team already laughing together, or are they sitting in tense silence, just desperately waiting for the boss to break the ice? Understanding the difference there might literally be the key to unlocking your team's true potential. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you on the next one.